I'm Matt Trueman, I'm a theatre critic. So it helps to know the story of the show you're going to see. It depends whether if you're seeing a new play, obviously that is part of the experience of seeing it, is watching this story unfold for the very first time without knowing. But if you're seeing a classic, it really helps to know what the basics are, what the sort of synopsis of that play is. Because often directors will choose to do something with that story. So knowing what they're working with is a really useful thing. But beyond that, I tend to go in and just see what's in front of me. I tend to look at it that everything on stage is meaningful. Everything that's on that stage is there for a reason. It could be someone's shoe being red, connecting it to a vase that's also red, and you've got to go, why are those two things similar? The set is obviously designed with a meaning involved. Every decision the actors are making has been made for a reason. So kind of everything's fair game. You've got to keep your eyes peeled at all times. So I always think the best way to do it is not to worry about the language, because it's quite a daunting thing, I think, the language, and you can sit there and try and focus on exactly what each line means, and actually in the moment you kind of absorb the story, you absorb what things are going on within a play, and you kind of get a sense through the way people are acting, through the way it's designed, without needing to strain for every line and its 10 puns in Syrian or whatever Shakespeare's genius has put into this line. You can kind of ride it out and not worry about the English literature side of things all the time. I think the first 10 minutes, maybe 5-10 minutes of a show are always quite daunting. You're always trying to get into the rhythms of a show. And with Shakespeare that's particularly true, because you're straining to work out who these people are and get into that sort of mode of speech. And eventually you realise that you start to grasp what the situation is, you start to grasp who these people are, and actually you sort of pick up on the meaning of the words without necessarily needing to decode them in your head the whole time. So I always have a notebook on my lap, and the way I use this notebook is just to keep kind of an awareness of what's going on in my head, things that I notice on the stage, thoughts that pop through my head. And the main reason I do that is so I can keep watching it and not have to try and remember things. So if you're not taking notes, you're constantly going, oh, I must remember to make this point about this. Whereas if you can just jot them down in a notebook, they're there, they're fixed, and you don't need to worry about them. I then tend to come back the next day in the morning when I write the review up and not even read them. It's almost like the process of taking those notes has lodged the thoughts in your head. And actually, if you refer to the notes, and I can end up with 16, 17 pages worth of just scribbles, most of which is illegible anyway. And if you pay too much attention to them, you can often bog down a review with too many tiny details. And actually what you come away with from a play, if you're trying to write, say, 500 words, you're trying to get the overall sweep, the sort of gestures, the meanings in a grand scale without honing in right into the details and getting lost in, what an actor had for breakfast that morning. So as a critic, you see all sorts. Obviously, you see new plays, you see musicals, you see Shakespeare plays, you see dance, experimental theatre, and that's one of the things that makes being a critic incredible. You get to see everything and anything. And you have to remember that you're writing for an audience that probably wants to go and see this kind of thing. If you're reviewing a Shakespeare play and you're writing for someone that doesn't like Shakespeare, then you're probably missing the point at some level. You're always trying to reach the audience for that play and communicate with them. But you've also got to be really true to yourself as well, and that's the main thing, is being honest about how you feel about work. But that thing of being daunted by a show is difficult. I hate musicals. Not all musicals, but a lot of them. I find them really impenetrable. I find them silly and strange, and I don't really have a very good ear for music, so I often find myself sort of wondering how I'm gonna go in there. And at the end of the day, you've just got to remember that it's what you think of that show that's important. That's why we're reading about it. It's to go, oh, I want to know what this person, this critic, has made of this show. And if you're honest and open about the fact that you're not necessarily an expert in that field, or you're interesting about it in other ways, that you don't have to be an Oxford professor of English to be able to be interesting about a play. As long as you capture it interestingly, capture it vividly, and put an argument across about that play, it's your argument and it's perfectly valid.